from the government standpoint, the government made it very clear in its principles of commitment to the people of Saint Lucia that youth development, among many other issues, as a top priority. And in that regard, the government has moved into action to develop the sports infrastructure and programming development of the youth sector, so spearheaded by the Department of Youth Development and Sports under the auspices of the Honorable Edmund Estefan. In that regard, we recognize that our young people have tremendous potential, tremendous talent, and we are moving in the direction of a career in sports, sports as a career, and so we will touch briefly on issues as it relates to the National Sports School, the School for Excellence for Sport, the Saint Lucia National Sports Academy, where the focus will be to get young people who want to pursue sports as a career, where they will get both an education and the kind of training that is required. And coupled with that is the infrastructure development strategy and the programming, because we recognize that it's important to have both the infrastructure and the programs to ensure that our young people can excel. And this is just an overview of what we've been doing, and let me hand you over to Mr. Lockerbie, who will give you a lot more details as far as what the program unfolds.
It's now been almost, well, exactly a year since we started the master planning part of the project. The master planning part of the project was initiated even as early as May 2017. I received a phone call from the Prime Minister asking if I would make my way back to Saint Lucia to undertake with him some discussion with the Minister of Sport and the Prime Minister regarding the status, conditions, and future of sport and entertainment facilities in the country. I was asked to do an assessment with the Department of Sport. I was asked to think of a model that wouldn't just allow Saint Lucia to kind of catch up to other countries in the region and even around the world, but to create a model for the region, to do things that would be unique and trend-setting, because sport is always a trend-setting type social activity. I think a country is never happier when their teams are doing well and their athletes are on television internationally as ambassadors and representing the country. Secondly, the fact that this is such a proud sporting nation, such great fans. St. Lucians love sport. But you've been held back by rather poor sports facilities. So my assessment with my team, the Parker Company, and using a well-known American engineering and architecture firm called Stewart, we embarked a year ago in assessing the over 150 sports facilities in the country. And when you think about it, in the 17 constituencies, we have cricket fields and football fields, we have school fields, we have basketball courts, we have netball courts, a few tennis courts. There's a lot of things we don't have. We have a boxing building here or there. Of course, we have the iconic Darren Sammy Stadium. We also have the George Odlum Stadium, mini stadium, Soufriere, and throughout the country. And if you really want to spend a week or two running around the country and looking at all the sports facilities, it's an enormous task. So when you think of it as an enormous task just to ride around and see them all, imagine having to maintain them all. And effectively, this government inherited, as every government has, tons of sports facilities that are effectively within the ministry, and a lot of the budget has had to be spent on maintenance and repair, mowing grass fields, seeding grass fields, as opposed to the budgets being spent on programming, coaching, youth, tournaments, leagues, uniforms, shoes. And so effectively, because the venues have been poor, the budget has been spent just to try to keep them alive as opposed to spending the money on people. And that's where this government is changing the face of sports in the country. The ministry, I'm told, will be spending its budget more on programming and officiating and and tournaments and leagues and developing teams and programs and sporting disciplines. But what we need is venues. And so our policy was to assess what is there in every constituency, look at the iconic venues, the national venues that have hosted international or major regional domestic events, and then look and see what just are community facilities. So long story short, we finished in the last month or two our master plan. And our master plan is still a work in progress. Every time I come to Saint Lucia, we keep fine-tuning it. So we haven't fully published the master plan yet because it's still needing some final tweaks. But in the next month or two, the master plan will be published. It's before you in draft form. And so here I present to you the working document that I'm working from. And so it's a little wrinkled and a little dirty because it goes with me everywhere. And again, not completely finished. But what we've done, if I were to give you a little bit of preview, I would show you that we've taken the country, and everywhere you see a line with a ball or a shoe or something, you'll see that we're noting that location for an upgrade in sports facilities throughout the country. You can see it's throughout the country, and yet it's not complete. This is not anything more than a preview of things to come. I can assure the nation we will have something in the master plan for everyone. So the master plan is identified somewhere in a neighborhood of 30 to 40 venues that we intend to look to upgrade, and some will be new, throughout the country, where we've looked at the programs, the teams, and the facilities that exist and tried to look at everything from population demographics. We've looked to predict, because master plans are not about today or tomorrow. Master plans are about the next 20 to 30 years. What will this country look to require in the next 20, 30 years in the way of sports? And so I just wanted to present to you today that the master plan is near completion for publication, but the government is already determined to embark on phase 2. So phase 2 has identified several venues to get started right away. They would be the following. In Soufrière, the mini stadium. We are looking to develop a world-class 400-meter track and a world-class football ground at Soufrière, because the George Odlum Stadium is not usable, hasn't been usable for quite some time, I believe 9 or 10 years. Football has been playing its World Cup qualifiers and international friendlies at the Darren Sammy Cricket Ground. They're not happy there, and trust me, the cricket people aren't happy that they're there. It's not a good marriage. Most cricket facilities are not good marriages for football, and vice versa. And so because there has not been a national stadium, we will turn the mini stadium in Soufrière into a temporary new national venue for football. With the blessing of the Football Association, they're looking very forward to a 2019 venue that would be able to host the next round of CONCACAF matches for football. Athletics will finally have a 400-meter track that people can actually enjoy sitting in grandstands and watching the sport. And so part of the master plan will be to figure out what to do with George Odlum Stadium, but at this time, the best result is to move those sports to a new venue. It will be project number 1. We're looking forward to getting started on the final plans this fall, construction later this fall, early winter, and completion by late winter, early spring. of 2019. Secondly, there's several other venues that have been selected, and they've been selected for model purposes, but they've also been selected for ease of multiple purposes being constructed at one time. And therefore, they will be the football ground in Macoud South in Dierceau, the facility would also have outdoor court sports and upgraded football facilities, perhaps lights and scoreboards, grandstands, and then to continue to take the beauty of that little ground, because it's not full FIFA field, and so we're going to use that as a model for future venues throughout the country that are not necessarily full FIFA international level grounds. They'll be community club grounds. And so Dierceau will be that model. We will then do Macoud North, right on the main road. Everybody drives by it most days, and it's at a school facility. And we're looking in the master plan to develop a full FIFA field. Several new outdoor courts for basketball, netball, and volleyball. Cricket nets for practice and training. And eventually, a 25-meter swimming pool, a public swimming pool. I might say that while the Swimming Association is setting records and winning medals around the region, there is not a public swimming pool in the country. So here's an association that has put together for us, by the way, one of the best reports for their association I've ever seen in the world. Your swimming association knows what they're doing. And I'm very proud to be able to say that we'll be helping the Swimming Association. The next venue, moving up the same road, if you think about Macoud South, Macoud North, where do we go next? We're looking at Dennery. Dennery is a great model because it's football and cricket in the same ground next to a school. So we'll be upgrading the cricket, we'll be upgrading the football. You know there's lights there already if you've passed the Dennery field. We'll be electrifying those lights, we'll be replacing fields, we'll be adding multiple sport courts for basketball, netball, volleyball. We'll be looking at adding some hospitality areas, bars and fan amenities, toilets. We'll be looking to add a children's playground. And in Dennery, we're also looking to take the sport facility and migrate it to the coast, to the waterfront, so that by a walking trail and then upgrading the waterfront, we're creating a safe, walking, wonderful environment that's making the whole thing more like a park. So the waterfront of Dennery connects to the sport facilities for events, upgrading, and the opportunity for their weekly limes to be also connected to the sporting venues. We're looking to do that in Dennery. That's the model for the bigger multi-sport complex. And we have identified throughout the country national stadium types like mini stadium, like small club community venues, Dierceau, larger school properties like Macoud North, and the Dennery multi-purpose many sports opportunity, large crowds, city, village environments at Dennery. Coming up north, Ricky has already talked about the Gros-Islet Secondary School. We are looking to develop the Saint Lucia Sports Academy, which will essentially be a middle and secondary school for elite athletes or athletes who look to become elite in the future. Eventually, it has the promise of being a boarding school. A sports academy are all over the world. Professional teams have their own, where they place students in the school, and you're waking up together in the morning, having breakfast, working out, going to school, working out a second time, having dinner, going to do your homework at night together in a study hall environment, maybe even film at night regarding your sport. to really understand it, and going to bed early because you're up at 6:30 the next morning starting again. The Football Federation Association has endorsed this school, and we look forward to working very closely with football and putting youth into this school, more than likely in early 2019. But the Groselet Secondary School has been selected as this world-class sports academy, and trust me, we brought in consultants who have world-class education experience as well as sports academy experience. So we will also be upgrading sporting facilities at Groselet Secondary School. Now that's phase 2. And if you didn't hear your constituency mentioned or named, it's because we can do 4 or 5 venues over a year, year and a half, and then we'll continue with the next 4 or 5, and continue with the next 4 or 5. So let me tell you that on the radar, we have just informed you about phase 2, what we're calling shovel-ready projects. These facilities that I just talked you through are almost ready to go and to begin construction. They're shovel-ready. Study-ready projects include the following. And what do I mean by study-ready? They still need more detailed master planning before they're really ready for public scrutiny and town hall meetings for us to figure out what to do next. But let's just face it. What do we do with George Odlum Stadium? Effectively, it's been condemned. When the hospital moves, what do we do with the stadium? We're not ready to give that answer yet, so we're studying it. The Darren Sammy Cricket Ground is really part of what I've been calling the Beausejour Sports District. When I was Chief Operating Officer of the Cricket World Cup, it was Beausejour Cricket Ground, and that's how I knew it. And after Darren's fantastic cricket career and the stadium being named after him, I still believe we're looking at a Beausejour Sports District. Yes, there's an indoor building there. If I had my way, we would air condition it and make it more multi-sport, multi-event. The tennis are there. They have some ideas for further venues and growth. Obviously, the cricket ground needs some work and upgrade. The last time I was involved in it was for the '07 World Cup, which it was beautifully managed for the World Cup as a semifinal site. But there's other land there, and so we're looking to potentially, and this is potentially on the radar, build a running track and synthetic turf football field on the outskirts of the cricket ground, on the outskirts, land next to it, so that in the north there would be a new running track and an artificial turf football field. We are also looking to potentially develop a swim center, a public swim complex. And then you would have in that region football, athletics, cricket, tennis, swimming, and indoor sports space. So Groselet and that whole district in the north would now have a sensational. And what that would also do is it would take the current Groselet field and leave it exclusively for cricket, with courts above the cricket ground that we'll look to improve as well, next to the school. So we believe that's a really great initiative for the north. Other venues that we'll be looking seriously at would be the Mindu Philip Marchand ground, to upgrade both of those venues. VG for both the courts and the fields. We want to provide some assistance to the Boxing Federation and their building at VG. And as we go throughout the rest of the country, down both coasts, from Anse-la-Raye, Canaries, Bexon, many, and obviously way down south, Choiseul and Laborie, and I'll get in trouble if I don't name everybody, so I'll just stop and say all the major communities will be seeing improvements to their venues. The other one that I think has gotten a little bit of media attention is what do we do with the Dyer Mall? If I have a few minutes, I'll just tell you that I've been passing the Dyer Mall for 17 years. I first came to Saint Lucia for the ICC to determine if Saint Lucia would be a proper venue for the Cricket World Cup in 2002 was my first visit. And I think the Dyer Mall was still under some construction then. But I've been passing it all these years, and one day I asked Ricky to drive me in. Now, if this was the United States where I'm from, it would have been fenced off with a big no trespassing sign, but we walked and drove right in. And I fell in love with that building immediately. That building has now been looked at by architects and structural engineers, and it's still in very, very fine condition. It was built very, very well. Yes, there's a lot of damage to it now. But we'll be going in there and looking to try and come up with a solution where the back of the building is very well suited for St. Lucia's only, and frankly, the region's really first world-class indoor sport and entertainment events theater arena, multi-purpose. It's large enough to have several thousand seats, and one night it could have a major basketball or boxing event. The next night it could have a major concert event, trade show event, boat shows, car shows, religious events, conferences. And meanwhile, the front of the building still has about 70,000 square meters. No, excuse me, wrong. 60,000 square feet of floor, so 180,000 square feet, about 20,000 square meters of retail and hospitality space. This really could become an amazing event space where there's events or sports practicing going on, and then meanwhile, plenty of hospitality, retail, maybe a fitness gym, a bank, things of that nature. Did you also know that there's about a 250 parking garage underneath? So you've got about 200 spaces of parking in front and 200 to 300 spaces below Dyer Mall. There's 500 parking spaces there. Name me another place other than the two football ground and the cricket ground. It's amazing. It's really an amazing place. So that's on the radar, as are many, many other venues throughout the country. I'll just complete by saying, to show that the initiative is real, we put out a worldwide tender to try and locate synthetic turf and running track, basketball court, netball court, volleyball court, you name the sport, cricket grounds, natural turf, practice batting cage nets, and eventually swimming pools as well, lighting companies, scoreboard companies, video board companies, all of the elements that are necessary for upgrading our sporting infrastructure. We sent to 9 sporting conglomerates around the world. 7 responded. After an intense review with the government's appointed selection committee, a committee that is chaired by Minister Estefan and also includes Minister Harold Stanislaus, Minister Leonard Montut, and other members of the community. We narrowed it down to 4 major worldwide conglomerates. These are the companies that when the great European football clubs or the NFL in the United States or the NBA think, who do they want for everything from flooring to sporting equipment, these are the companies that they look to. And so before me I have the 4 proposals of the 4 finalists. 10 or 12 people flew in this past weekend to look at all the venues, tour the venues. They met with the selection committee socially on Monday night. The Prime Minister came and met each company and encouraged them to give the best deal possible and to learn from them what they had seen in their tours. And yesterday, each company interviewed and presented their bid to the selection committee at the Harbor Club conference room. It was very, very intense. These companies are all very good. As a consultant, I probably can sleep well at night if any of them get the work. But it's winner take all. The company that will be selected will enter into an agreement with the government to do the 5 facilities we've talked about, and then would have the right of first refusal, if those go well, to continue the next phase. In other words, we're looking to have a long-term partnership with one of these companies. And that's the update. We have not selected them. There's more work to do. We have to kick some tires. Because these are the 4 finalists, they presented us with facilities that they have all around the region and in the states. So over the next few weeks, several of the selection committee members will go kick tires and visit some of the venues that have been recommended we see. But more than likely in September, there should be an announcement of which company has been selected.
The Mobile Fund Voice Partnership Company, you mentioned earlier, just a clarification in terms of the software fees of you looking at. Let's clear up a bit. You mentioned this fall, meaning when you say this fall and winter of next year, let's be a little more specific.
Yeah, and I also forgot to mention the cricket pitch that we're looking to do there too. Let me just say that the schedule would be, we'll select one of these companies, but our engineering team is already beginning the design of the 400-meter running track and fields and courts. And therefore, we'll take it from concept to reality as far as engineered drawings. We'll get to about 80% on our own while we're going through the selection process. And when we pick the partner company, who would be the track surfacing or artificial turf company, they also will have their input because they all have technical specifications of what makes their surface work the best. And therefore, the last 25% is working with a selected company. So our goal would be by November to have all of that engineering work completed, pricing finalized, agreements made, contracts signed, so that construction can begin November, which would mean completion in February, March, or April, depending on weather. And if I could just finish, 2 points about that. We know cricket's been played at Mini Stadium. We had to make a judgment call, and we've met with the cricket authorities and the local folks, and we've come to the agreement that a new cricket venue needs to be built, and we've been looking at the Ruby Estate banana plantation just several meters, 100 meters away from Mini Stadium, where we would build an exclusive cricket ground down there too. We also have been taking a serious look at the old and no longer operable copra factory, and there's quite a few facilities, particularly a very large indoor warehouse that we think would be a wonderful place to put a synthetic surface of some kind for indoor sports, but also for entertainment venues. And this would give Soufriere, which we know to be a large tourism destination, football, international athletics, domestic league, regional cricket, and an indoor facility. So we think that's all to begin, and based on our final numbers and budget, we'll focus on the mini stadium, we'll also focus on development of the cricket ground, and then we'll develop courts, a swimming pool at Soufriere also.
Interestingly, you mentioned before Mikul North and Mikul South in terms of community grounds and so on, and 25 meters swimming pool. You also mentioned Denring, cricket and football, fair enough. But you talk about the George Adam Stadium.
Yes, sir.
And you also mentioned in the preamble that swimming has a great idea as to what they want. The South, you didn't mention anything about the swimming pool for the South?
Well, what I've tried to be clear is that we will be master planning every constituency. The question that I have as an independent international sports consultant is. When you look at George Odlum Stadium, what do you do there? I have asked hundreds of people in the North and the South, if you were going to build the new national stadium, I was asked by the Prime Minister to look at the country with a blank sheet as if nothing existed. And that's what I do for FIFA World Cups and Olympic Games and Cricket World Cups. Would you build your national football and athletics stadium in that location if you had to start all over again? It's a trick question. It's a trick question. Because everybody, I'm not going to say everybody, 90% of my straw poll will say, no, it's in the wrong place. It's too far away from the majority of the population. Is that case? I'm a master planner. I'm thinking the next 20 to 30 years. You're about to have a new international airport. It's on the clock to get done in the next few years. The DSH project, Pearl of the Caribbean project, seems to be underway. I've seen the renderings. I've met with the developers. So if you're me, and it's 5 years from now, and a lot of the Pearl of the Caribbean is underway with new hotels, housing, lots of jobs, perhaps making a lot of St. Lucians to move south because they'll be working in the Vieux-Fort area. The international airport is completed. So I ask you, is the George Odlum Stadium in the right place? It is, if the international airport and Pearl of the Caribbean is completed and is full of life down there. Because if I'm an international team, I want to fly in and 5 minutes later be at the stadium and have quite a few hotel options right there as well. So it's quite a major undertaking. But if in the end it's in the wrong location, what do we do with it? Well, the running track, surprisingly enough, after all these years and after the storms and everything else, is in very good condition. Do we tear down the grandstands and build something a little more minimal but still have a track and a football field there? Of course. Or do we come back and build what could be argued to be, a national stadium on that location? So I say it's study ready. We don't have the answer yet. But we're certainly very seriously considering many, many options, including if you didn't keep the national stadium there, where would you keep it? One of the ideas is to move the national stadium and an entire national sports park to the cul-de-sac area, where all roads lead.
You mentioned this is real, right?
Yes, it is.
In 2013, 2014, or 2014, 2015, there was a sword studding ceremony for a swimming pool adjacent to the Darren Summit Cricket Ground.
Correct.
In 2017, in 2018, closing down. Nothing has been done. How realistic is this? How real is this thing? Where is government getting the money to build some of these projects you mentioned? Government have issues. Not this the government, but government of the I'm referring to, whichever government is there. They have problems in getting money for sports in this country. If you look at the various budgets over the years, sports has never ever given its true treatment. Now that you have a master plan for sports, and you mentioned 30 years, I might be gone then. Where is government?
I will be gone.
Where is government getting money to?
I'm not the government.
I know you're not, but I guess you have an idea.
But I've shaken the hand of the ambassador from Taiwan.
You want to explain a little bit? And you say you shake
I
his
played
hand.
golf with him too.
So I can join the golf team then.
If you have a game, he's pretty good.
So you're saying here that the Taiwanese government will play a major role?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Lockerbie, you mentioned the use of artificial turf when you're building some of these facilities. How conducive is that to our type of climate that we have here, artificial turf?
Fair and good question. How aware are you of the soon-to-be completed artificial turf field in Mabuya? Did you say it right? It's the hardest name I've had in this entire country. Mabuya Valley. FIFA has a project called the FIFA Goal Project, where they help countries around the world upgrade their venues. This work was done prior to our being started. So technically, it's not in our purview, but it is. We want to help the Football Association make it as good a facility as they add other things to the grounds. One of the 4 companies before you is the firm building that field. As a matter of fact, today, that international turf company, the company name is Edelgrass, will be meeting with the Football Association, C.O. Williams, and other officials to approve the stone base and drainage work that's been done over the last few months. When it is accepted, then FIFA will read the report and determine that they are now ready to authorize Edelgrass to put down the turf. So your country is about to have its very first international FIFA level approved synthetic turf field. So why would FIFA do that? There's all sorts of, let's just say, cons and pros and cons, benefits and issues that come with any field. Last night I was at the Darren Sammy cricket ground, and I would tell you that technically every sport field you have in this country, if it was natural grass, should look as good as that. But when we built that field for the Cricket World Cup, when we rebuilt it for the Cricket World Cup, we built it by international standards, and honestly, it's the only international natural grass field in the country. There is a formula to building these natural grass fields. It's the only field in the country that followed that technique, and that is why every other field you have in the country has effectively little to no grass on it, no irrigation, no drainage, and the maintenance has been negligent. Therefore, balls don't roll well, people don't play well, injuries take place on natural grass fields as well. There's a tiredness that comes to the legs from playing on bad natural grass fields. FIFA knows this. FIFA has made a decision and has now done several hundred of these fields around the world for national federations to help your team stop being in the lower 25% of the rankings worldwide. I don't want to quote the Football Federation, but one important gentleman told me, please carpet the entire country. So we have the Federation's absolute endorsement. What you will get is fairly indestructible fields that require some but not a lot of maintenance. They will have 10-year warranties, and yet on the average last 13 to 15 years before they need real replacement when done correctly. And that is why we have been very slow and very diligent in picking whoever will be that turf company. It also requires an amazingly proper subbase. So the company that's been putting down this subbase has been watched very stringently by international assessors. And so hopefully today it gets the approval. That same company did the subbase for the Mondo running track at George Odlum Stadium. And I will tell you, after 9 years and all the storms and decay that's gone on in that stadium, that running track could host an international competition today. It doesn't have a seam out of place. That means the subbase was done perfectly by a company here in Saint Lucia. So we're very proud of the fact that there is some experience, and we'll be able to watch and see how the Mabuya field takes root and moves forward. There are issues with synthetic turf. Every player in the world would rather play on natural grass, but Arsenal quality natural grass. So what you're seeing in blue is the mini stadium piece of property. North of it is the copra factory. Therefore, east of it is the Ruby Banana Estate, where we would like to add cricket. So that's the property requirements of Soufrière. This is the concept of what the mini stadium could and should look like in the course of the next year, year and a half. Concept, gentlemen. Running track, synthetic field, the kind of rust color facilities are 2 outdoor courts, a 25-meter swimming pool located. And to do all that, yes, we'll be moving fencing. We'll actually be cleaning up the river. We would like to create a walking path past the stadium. We would like to add some spectator areas on the riverside, some bars on the riverside, so that in reality you'd kind of have a mound underneath the very nice shade trees in the 2 corners next to the river. Yeah, we just want to take over the whole venue and make it, of course, a sporting destination and entertainment destination. Stop by for a piton and underneath the piton. I mean, honestly, I have said, and I've had these companies agree, if this stadium gets to be built the way we are envisioning it, it could be one of the most beautiful, most photographed sporting venues I've ever been part of. With the Piton Mountain right at midfield. I hope the Piton Beer Company is listening. I would call it Stade de Piton.
So this will be the first project to kick off.
The reason why is because your football association, and I think we can agree is probably the #1 sport in the country, has not had a home for 10 years. And with it, they agree that this venue was always designed to fit a track in it. And of course, the school kids run on a grass track at the moment. And we had to look and say, international football can be played here. International athletics can compete here. International cricket cannot. As a cricket ground, it would not meet any minimum standard. So it's a local, fun, great place for the T20. We agree. We've seen the events. We agree. And as the man who was formerly the COO of a Cricket World Cup, I'm a cricket fan. But we need to make sure that we could at least get 2 international sporting disciplines here. Quite honestly, with a 25-meter pool, there can be swimming competitions and use of the dressing rooms and the grounds for warm-up and grandstands and things of that nature. So there's plenty to do here in what is an iconic tourism destination for your country.
Roughly, how much you believe is going to cost the Taiwanese and the central government?
We'll make that announcement with the master plan publication.
That is only specific for Soufrière.
I understand the question.
Mr. Lockerbie, you mentioned most of the major sports that we play here, except for cycling. I was told by the Cycling Association to ask you, any plans for a velodrome at all?
You know, if you don't think big, go home. Again, if you'll permit me to say, for those who missed, there's a master plan is always a concept document. You then create the phases that you believe you can work with, and then you fund it appropriately. Prime Minister and I have had a lot of thinking with the Minister of Sport about a centralized sporting location that one day would be in the proper location for all citizens of Saint Lucia, but would be one heck of a tourism destination and make Saint Lucia the model for sports tourism in the region. This is a very competitive business. The amount of money that tourists pay to go run in marathons, triathlons, play golf, the number of money that is spent by countries to come to your place for swimming, cricket, football, that is a sports tourism industry. And that is what, gentlemen, we're looking to do. think of sports as a business, because the rest of the world does. There's a reason why athletes make multiple millions of dollars in the business of sport, and why billionaires like to own sports teams. We have no real professionalism in the country, and we're looking to strategize that with the ministry as well. What is this? Well, this is cul-de-sac, and we've just simply called it the cul-de-sac sports park for now. And if I am looking at it from my upside down, the two light circles you see would be two cricket grounds, back to back. Stealing good ideas from softball and baseball. You can go to every American town and see a softball ring with 4 to 6 softball fields and 4 to 6 baseball fields. Here's 2. With an indoor building for support. It could be where media and visitors sit and watch the game. It could be an indoor batting cage. By the way, there's cricket nets next to each field. Everything in gray is parking. Everything in dark green would be synthetic turf. Everything in light green, natural turf. You have football, major fields. You have small football, 5-on-5 type fields. You have a swimming complex. You have a new national stadium, if that was the answer to what to do with the George Odlum Stadium, with a practice track next to it. So you have a 400-meter blue track with the national stadium there, with a practice track of 200 meters next to it. And then next to the cricket, there would be everything from motocross to BMX, bicycling, and sure enough, we would look for mountain biking, and we would also consider a velodrome if that came to pass. Velodromes are very rare, so we would work with the Cycling Association to determine if they were better off with a BMX or a velodrome, or maybe perhaps both. But we're again in the concept range. But can you imagine that region where all roads lead to cul-de-sac, and having effectively all the major sports? And we would move the sporting academy to that site too. Can you imagine your top athletes going to school and walking out of their building and having cricket, swimming, basketball, football, athletics, volleyball, netball, boxing, cycling, hundreds of meters away from their last class? This is world-class thinking for the business of sport, but it's not the first priority. First, we work on getting venues throughout the constituencies, upgrading the venues in the communities, with an idea that one day a private entity would partner with government to develop this.
So where exactly would this area be located? The location, what?
Well, I can only tell you that if you know the current cul-de-sac area as you're driving south, this to your left, grocery stores and gas stations are over here. You go right down to Soufriere, you go left to Viewfort. So this is where all the roads lead. And I refer to it as Saint Lucia's Central Park.
As you get to cul-de-sac from Bexon, that's in front of you, that whole area.
Where they used to have the park?
Right.
Okay.
Right now there's a lot of cows.
Okay.
But have you taken in consideration that area is an area that floods when it rains and so on?
Are you familiar with where the New York Giants and the New York Jets play in New Jersey? Called the Meadowlands. That's a nice name for what was once a swamp and a dump. And now there's several $1 billion worth of sporting facilities on that location. It just takes a good engineer.
Yes, I agree with what you're saying. But in 2013, we had 575 millimeters of rain in Castries, and that place had water,
Yeah.
like the height of this building.
And Giant Stadium would have been already 5 feet underwater before they ever started the project. So I would just say that we think it's the right location, and you're absolutely right to question But I will also tell you that in my industry, the very first thing we do on every sports project is address water management. You're either building someplace where there's a drought and you got to get water to it, or there's a flood and you got to get water away from it.
Can I ask a question here?
Sir.
You mentioned some of the major sporting associations, cricket, football.
Saint Lucia. Was all the associations invited around the table to discuss?
Yes, they have been. We've been meeting in this room with many associations. Anybody who chose not to come was their business. Let me just talk to you about the word dream. Perhaps you don't know my history.
I know your history, Mr. Algaby.
Well, you may not know this story.
I know the story, though.
My story would simply be that when I was hired by the ICC, there was no way that Saint Lucia was getting a single cricket match for the World Cup. You had no chance. The powers that be at the West Indies Cricket Board did not know you existed. That's the same for St. Vincent, St. Kitts. If you recall, the ICC was so nervous about having the World Cup here, they allowed Bermuda, the Bahamas, the United States, and Cayman to enter into the bidding. They did not believe we could get 9 cricket stadiums ready for the World Cup. When I came and saw Beausejour Cricket Ground in 2003 with the great and late Desmond Skeet and the architect Claude Guillaume taking me on my first tour, I wrote the ICC the next day and said, if we have 9 of these, the West Indies will be fine. I was still told there would be no West Indies cricket matches here for the World Cup. Well, you know the rest is history. And I'm a fan of this country, but I'm also a man who gets things done.
See, the reason why I've been asking the questions, for too long now, right? Governments come, government go.
County wants to do, and so they call a town hall, and the architects, the American architects, are showing softball wheels, baseball wheels, football facilities, and a soccer facility over here, and a 50-meter lap pool, and tennis courts. And at that town hall that I attended, 90% were West Indians. And they basically said, tear that up. We don't want any of that. We want a cricket ground. We want soccer fields. We want netball courts. And with all due respect, we don't really want a 50-meter lap pool. We want a children's swim park. And $60 million later, that's what Broward did. They listened. They allowed the town hall. And that's my best example and worthy of this community to hear, because you scored 209 the other night on that pitch. Not sure what happened last night.